Dewsnap by Iain Robinson. Marty parked his little car neatly beside the rubbish-strewn curb. It was a bit of a desolate spot, the Dewsnap, a 10-acre demolition site covered in rubble and concrete, hidden by a jungle of birch trees and weeds. Dave looked around. He was a big lad, and he was perspiring. It was warm in the car, the hottest day of the year so far. But Marty hadn't been able to afford the aircon pack when he bought the cute little duck-egg blue Fiat. Marty stopped the engine. "Take a deco, then?" Dave extricated himself from the little car. They'd built it with Italian women in mind, not 16-stone, 6'3" Mancunians. Marty was more the target customer, being rather petite and compact. Marty said, "They tried to market this place as a retail park. Do you remember? It had a big sign here." He pointed vaguely. With an artist's impression on it." Dave remembered. Some joker had photoshopped cheap retail units onto an ideal scene. Wherever it wasn't the Dewsnap. The delirious shoppers in the picture were drunk on thoughts of lampshades, cushions and garden furniture. Dave said, "Wonder where the signs went. Blew down or nicked for firewood, eh?" With the signs gone, the only aspiration now was for a Lowry theme park. Marty looked around him like a meerkat. "Nature, yeah. Whenever mankind looks away, it goes off in its own relentless way." Dave looked about him, then shrugged. "So, you say that there's a road entrance, yeah?" Marty nodded. "It's over there between those houses on the edge of the scrubland." Dave didn't fancy the brambles here, so he followed Marty to an empty row of terraced houses. They seemed to be cowering, anticipating the wrecking ball's imminent caress. Marty said, "You got your stuff, Dave? Need a hand?" Dave handed over a tripod and a case. He kept the video camera and gadget bag. "I can't see that shed you mentioned, Marty." Marty looked at his friend, his expression miming, "Really?" But he kept walking, carrying the case and tripod. "You'll see it's well hidden by the undergrowth." "Aye, only I need something concrete to hang the video on, you know." Dave was a vlogger, specialising in frantic urbex YouTube videos. They were laced with a vague hint of the supernatural, and had a certain popularity on the internet. Marty was along on the explore because he was Dave's old school friend, not to mention his unpaid location scout and cameraman. Dave always doubted Marty's location choices, but they invariably turned out to be special. Then Dave would take the credit. Marty didn't mind. It was exciting exploring these places, and he wouldn't have the nerve to explore on his own. Here it was, the way in, a rough trackway between two rows of houses on the Miles Platting Road. A rusty gate guarded it, along with a faded sign that read, "Dewsnap Sidings, strictly private, trespassers will be prosecuted." The Dewsnap. Haunt of kids up to no good, amorous couples, doggers, dog walkers, and occasionally vloggers. Except that Dave felt a little uneasy. "Marty, you sure this is all right? I mean, it says no trespassing and all that." Marty gave a sigh of exasperation. "Oh, Dave, let's see the place, shall we? You want to get a banging vid on YouTube, don't you?" He blew out and wiped the sweat off his forehead. "You know this, Dave. You know this. Every fucking time, mate. Anyway, what can they do to us?" Dave muttered. "Prosecute us?" Marty scoffed. "No, it's not worth their time. But hey, go home. I don't blame you. Live your best life. Give us the camera. I'm all over this like a rash mate." No, just checking. It's cool, innit?" The full extent of the boskage became clear once they were over the gate. Dave went ahead, bulldozing away through the tall weeds, brambles and young birch trees. "Hey, Mart, how long since people use this place, you reckon?" Marty whistles. "Well, they abandoned it in the 70s. They've left it alone since. Keep following the path." After a few minutes they arrived at an area of less dense vegetation. A rusty railway track sidled under rosebay willow herb, as if still hiding from the evil Dr. Beeching. It veered to a tall, forbidding brick shed, which had somehow remained intact. It stood like one of those old sea forts in the channel, adrift in a sea of birch trees. Dave was feeling the vibe now. He ran an online channel called Edgeland Urbex, specialising in explores of disused and abandoned buildings. The Dewsnap ticked all his happy boxes, but he wasn't about to admit that to Marty. Marty, his loyal school friend, the one who always had faith in him, the one who supplied the energy behind his films. Right now, though, he could see the titles rolling. Edgeland Urbex and the Old Engine Shed. What lurks within? Watch and discover. When he edited the big reveal, he would use his signature phrase, "That's Urbex, baby." Meanwhile, Marty was beating a path to the front of the shed. Brambles and various clinging weeds tried their best to impede him. They wrapped themselves round his legs and worried his arms with their barbs. But Marty was resolute, thinking only of the goal, now drawing ever nearer. The territory became less hostile. There was more track under Marty's feet. Almost there, he thought, if he didn't trip over the rails. Marty set off again, but jumped, startled by a blackbird's cry of alarm as it flew across his path. She must have a nest somewhere, he thought. A good hideout for her here. Close up, the shed had a presence, as if the 19th century still lingered. The tall doorway, built for locomotives, was still imposing. Marty assumed the 3 narrow brick arches above the door were for ventilation. Long vertical windows flanked each side, the glass broken and the apertures boarded up. There was an ancient cast-iron water tower beside the shed. Here, he noticed, everything was eerily silent. No noises from the busy outside world intruded. The 2 explorers became silent, lost in their thoughts. Dave imagined a little tank engine going off to shunt wagons at the docks. He felt a warm wave of nostalgia for something he'd never experienced. That was the trouble with living your life through books, he thought. Sniffing, he pulled his phone out and took a few establishing shots of the shed and water tower. The sky was perfect now, with some big dark clouds giving an oppressive feeling. Perfect for social media. His followers would love it. He set up the tripod and camera, then did an ad-lib. Guys, so here we are, another Edgeland Urbex adventure." He smiled and made a pointing gesture at his own shoulder height. "If you enjoy this, don't forget to like and subscribe. Guys and gals, I give you the forgotten loco shed." He lifted the camera off the tripod and did some handheld. His subscribers went bananas for that stuff. As he quartered the shed, a smell of disturbed vegetation wafted around him. It was difficult to move without getting his jeans festooned with cleavers and fluffy rosebay willow herb seeds, while his hands were pierced by bramble barbs. Another blackbird burst out from the undergrowth, startling him with its piercing call. He stifled a small scream. "Bloody hell, Marty, I'm cut to ribbons and now we've got kamikaze blackbirds." Marty chuckled. "I know. They're terrible, aren't they? It's like a scene from Hitchcock." Dave was such a wuss. He'd elevated moaning and whinging almost to a superpower, Marty thought. The 2 friends stood in front of the doors. Dave imagined what could be behind them, though he knew the place was probably empty. But for one delicious moment, he allowed himself to imagine a rusty old tank locomotive awaiting his camera. The idea of reality intruding on his fantasy made him reluctant to open the doors. Instead, he filmed a little more, getting some atmospheric details. Oh shit, this was how all his adventures ended, in anticlimax. Another vlogger had suggested finding joy in minor wonders, such as old graffiti or a clay pipe on a shelf. But to hell with that. Dave wanted a dirty, enormous steam engine lying in wait behind those doors. A giant rusty behemoth, a refugee from some Valhalla for rusty heroes. Afterwards he'd make a video he'd call Secret Location. He didn't want other glory hunters to come and make better videos. After all, some of them had broadcast quality gear. So Dave did yet more establishing footage, taking in the old ship canal. It blubbed and mumbled to itself in the fitful breeze, its brown water concealing many old bikes and prams, and perhaps much worse. Best not to think of that. Across the canal, an old cotton mill's reflection shimmered. It teetered on the edge, windows wide, screaming silently with the shock of having its innards torn out. Dave chuckled. "Bloody hell, Marty, this is good stuff." Marty smiled, pleased that Dave was enjoying this. "Shall we have a look inside, then?" There was a little door incorporated into the big front doors. Still filming, Dave tried the handle. After some determined pulling, it opened. A slight breeze greeted Dave as he walked inside. Light streamed through gaps in the boarded windows, illuminating the dark room. His eyes adjusted to the gloom. Then his heart fell, as he saw that there was no engine. Oh, come on, he'd known that, of course he had. Marty kept quiet, sensing his friend's disappointment and feeling deflated himself. But for all the anticlimax, you could still imagine what this place had been. There was an old workbench where fitters would have worked. Bars of light came in from above, where a smoke trough must have saved the place from being a Stygian hell. Dave interrupted Marty's thoughts. He turned and chuckled. "Look at this!" There were 2 large boards stacked against the shed wall, damp and warped. You could see that they were the original advertising hoardings. Dave said, "So they hadn't flown off to Urmston one windy night. They'd been stuffed in here." He pulled one away from the wall. "Marty, have you got that 1,000-lumen torch handy?" Marty fumbled about in his bag, then located the torch, switching it on. Dave started filming, using the tripod. He muttered, "This is better than graffiti or an old clay pipe." Marty noticed the walls kept some grimy evidence of whitewashing. Here and there were some pencil scribbles. Near the workbench was a line in copperplate that read, "Dennis Lummus, 1956. Another inscription was a list of measurements for something in inches. A crude pencil drawing showed part of a machine, as if a fitter was planning to repair it. It looked complicated. Marty took photographs quietly. He would produce these later to help Dave with the film. The writing seemed to breathe life into the place, affecting Marty. Dave, meanwhile, was busy moving the hoarding, grunting and perspiring. "Give us a hand, will you?" he spluttered. They struggled with the last board that had some 2x3 lengths still attached. Dave shouted, suddenly urgent, "There! Shine the torch! What's that?" Marty aimed the torch at a wheel. Could it be a bogie from one of the old steamers? But no, it wasn't. It had funny shapes on the circumference, and it was a bit too shiny. Dave bent down to examine it and cursed. "The bloody door of one of those big dryers at Laundrette." Marty stifled a giggle. Poor old Dave. It was a shame about him. After some more filming, they shuffled out. It was still sunny and warm outside. Inside, the old shed had a clammy atmosphere, redolent of ancient soot deposits. They returned to the road in silence. Once back on the pavement, Dave deployed one of his saturnine smiles, immediately cheering Marty up. Dave's irascibility over the explorer's many disappointments had blown over. He laughed and said, "Hey, this explorer is par for the course, right? Remember that bloody bit of land between the ship canal and the Weaver Navigation near Runcorn?" Marty chortled. "Oh, yeah. It was about 6 feet wide, covered in brambles and small trees. I remember." Marty thought it best not to mention that Dave had nearly fallen in. Dave carried on. "Oh, yeah, and the disused bridge at Latchford. They ruined it by the 10-foot-high security fencing." Marty said, "Like Trump's wall, weren't it?" Dave was warming to his subject now. "Oh, and the railway tunnel that took us 3 hours to reach, cutting away through trees and deadly weeds. It had fallen in after 20 yards. They both howled with laughter. Fortunately, the place was quiet, or people would have assumed they were drunk. Marty hooted, "Oh, wait, this is the best one. The abandoned spooky Victorian house in the woods, remember? Your aunt said it was bloody haunted." Dave's face creased with mirth. "Jesus, yeah. We scoped it on Google Earth and then took hours to get there, since it was in deepest Wales." Marty finished the story. "And then we found someone had converted it into a holiday home." They laughed on the way to the compact car, which was hot like an oven. Marty opened the doors to let some cool air in. He looked at Dave and gave his understated laugh. "Good times, eh?" Dave grinned back. "Good times, mate."